What happens when the natural order of a world is not merely broken, but violently rewritten by the hands of madness? We have watched the slow, bleeding decay of Nosgoth, from the humid, flesh-bound sanctuaries of the south to the clinical, sub-zero isolation of the north. But today, the archives lead us to a rupture in the geography of the world itself, a grotesque anomaly where fire and flesh consume the ice. Today, we turn the heavy, iron-bound pages of the Onyx Codex to continue our deep-dive analysis of the 1996 retro classic Blood Omen, Legacy of Kain. We are leaving the opulent, blood-soaked halls of the Black Forest to return to the freezing mountains, entering the unnatural volcanic dome known as Dark Eden. Prepare for a deep-dive exploration of nature weaponized by insanity, the profound cowardice of the gods, and the ultimate devastating humiliation of the immortal Paladin, Malik. Welcome back to the deep dive in the Onyx Codex.
Oh, it is. It's so good to be back in the archives with you today.
Yeah, same here. I mean, you are walking with Kain into what is basically a planetary psychotic break.
That is exactly what it is. It's a complete geographical meltdown.
Right. And what we really need to figure out today, for you listening, is how a pawn turns himself into a king when the chessboard itself is, physically melting beneath his feet.
Yeah, it's such a deeply chaotic arc of Kain's journey. I mean, this is where the physical world ruptures entirely.
Yes, and where the caretakers of reality are just completely exposed. Plus, Kain fundamentally shifts his entire approach to survival. But before we march up into the boiling ice, we really have to bridge the gap from where we left off.
Right, because the end of our last deep dive still feels incredibly manipulative.
Completely manipulative.
Yeah.
We left Kain walking out of the Black Forest. He navigated those clinical trials in the Oracle's caves, survived that deeply unsettling museum of oddities, and made it through the decadent, blood-soaked gauntlet of Vorador's mansion.
And he struts out of there with Vorador's signet ring in his pocket, right? Like, he's totally convinced he is this sovereign predator making his own choices.
Exactly. He really thinks he went to the Oracle, demanded answers, and wrestled control of his own fate.
Which is the fundamental tragedy of Kain at this stage in his life. I mean, he genuinely believes he is the one driving the narrative here.
Right. He feels like he actively sought out these ancient hidden powers.
Yeah, confronted them on his own terms and extracted the exact tool he needs to proceed. To him, the ring isn't just a magical artifact, it's physical proof of his agency.
But, I mean, I'm looking at the Grandmaster's design here, and I'm really struggling with the logic.
Yeah.
Because Moebius, the time streamer who is, posing as the Oracle, he explicitly allowed all of this to happen.
He did. He orchestrated it.
Right. And he is omniscient. He can see every branching timeline. So I keep getting stuck on the why. Why would Moebius, who is ultimately running the board, intentionally point Kain toward Vorador?
It's a huge risk on paper.
Yeah. Why hand a vengeful, unpredictable vampire the exact tool required to defeat the unkillable Paladin, Malek? It just seems like arming the very weapon that might turn on you eventually.
Well, if we look closely at the psychology of an omniscient being, we see an arrogance that is entirely justified by that foresight. Moebius isn't threatened by Kain acquiring a massive power-up at all.
Really?
Yeah.
Because he knows the outcome anyway.
Exactly. In fact, the specific timeline Moebius is cultivating actively requires it. Moebius sees the board in its entirety, right? He maps every possible iteration of consequence.
Right.
He knows definitively that if Kain doesn't retrieve Vorador's ring, Kain dies at Malek's hands in the northern mountains. And if Kain dies there, Moebius loses his most lethal, albeit unwitting, executioner.
Wow. So Moebius is deliberately engineering a targeted missile here.
That is the grim reality of it, yeah. The shepherds of Nosgoth are pointing their weapon at the board's most troublesome pieces.
Man, that's dark.
By ensuring Kain has the means to defeat Malek, Moebius essentially guarantees that Kain will continue his march, systematically slaughtering the corrupted members of the Circle of Nine. Moebius has zero desire to enter the fray himself.
Obviously not. He's the guy behind the curtain.
Right. He has found a highly motivated, incredibly violent vampire who is willing to do all the dirty work, driven by this false promise of a cure for his condition.
It really makes you think, how often you think you're making your own choices, when really someone has left the perfect tool in your path.
Oh, absolutely. The illusion of free will.
Right. Kain thinks he's the player outsmarting the system, but he's just the deadliest piece on the board being slid into position. And if Moebius is sending him into the most dangerous, mutated corner of the world, Kain needs to be equipped for something way beyond a standard skirmish.
He absolutely does.
So help me break down the physical and magical economy Kain is bringing into this next phase. Because up until now, we've seen him rely really heavily on his iron sword. but the environment he's walking into requires a completely different approach.
Oh, his arsenal has evolved dramatically to meet the escalating hostility of the world. First, let's consider the physical tools. He now wields the spiked mace.
Right, which is just brutal.
It is not a weapon of finesse or elegant swordsmanship. Not at all. It is a brutal, heavy instrument specifically designed with kinetic devastation in mind.
He requires it to literally crush stone.
Right.
And shatter the calcified environmental barricades he is about to face.
Exactly. It's a tool of primitive, unyielding force for an incredibly unyielding environment.
Because, I mean, he can't drink from a stone wall. He needs blunt force trauma for the landscape itself, but he still needs the iron sword for the organic enemies, just to sustain his vampiric thirst.
Yes, the sword is swift. It cuts down flesh so he can feed.
And feeding is paramount because of the massive drain on his physiology right now.
It is. But the truly revolutionary addition to his loadout here is the energy bank. To understand its significance, we really have to look at the magical economy of a newly turned vampire in Nosgoth.
Okay, let's get into that.
Prior to this, Kain's magic was a strictly finite, incredibly precious resource. Every spell he cast drained his internal reserves, forcing him to choose carefully between physical combat and magical expenditure.
I see. So it's an economy of scarcity. He's constantly calculating, like, do I have enough energy to cast this spell, or do I need to hold it back just in case?
Exactly. But the energy bank completely disrupts that scarcity. It acts as a highly expansive external reservoir for arcane energy.
Oh, wow. So it's basically an external battery pack for dark magic.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
Yeah.
It allows him to store magic far beyond his natural bodily limits. Mechanically and narratively, this is the exact bridge that takes Kain from being a desperate melee brawler to a true sorcerer king.
Right, because he no longer has to ration his power.
Exactly. He can rely on complex spells, continuous shape-shifting, and devastating ranged magic without the constant fear of depleting his core vitality.
Which fundamentally changes his posture in the world. He walks taller. And add to that the ultimate trump card he now carries, Vorador's signet ring.
The calling card of the oldest apex predator alive.
Right. Kain has the unprecedented ability to summon a creature that even the gods fear.
So he is armed, empowered, and fully confident as he marches back into the northern mountains.
Which makes the ensuing geographical shock so profound. I mean, if you were guiding Kain back up into those peaks, you are bracing for a repeat of that antiseptic abyss we documented in the previous archives.
You're expecting silent, creeping ice.
Yes. Freezing winds that cut to the bone and those lethal pools of glacial acid. You are mentally prepared for a world that is cold, static, and dead. But then the geography completely shatters.
It is a profound assault on the senses, really. It defies every law of meteorology and geology.
Totally. You're climbing these frozen, desolate peaks, your boots are crunching on the permafrost, and suddenly, smack in the middle of the glaciers, you hit a massive, unnatural dome of volcanic heat.
It's jarring.
It is. The ice isn't just melting, it is violently boiling into this thick, sulfurous steam that just chokes the air. The earth itself mutates beneath your feet. You transition in mere footsteps from walking on ancient stone to treading on pulsing, living flesh and deeply corrupted, thorn-choked flora.
This is Dark Eden.
Right. And let me pull a specific observation from the archives to ground this for you. This is Kain's internal monologue upon discovering the perimeter of this place. You have to imagine him standing there, the freezing snow whipping at his back, staring into this blistering, humid nightmare. He observes, I had returned to the north, expecting the clean, cold embrace of the snow. Instead, I found a cancer on the land, a garden of twisted trees, boiling earth, and steam that choked the lungs. It was an affront to nature, spawned by minds that had lost all touch with sanity.
A cancer on the land is honestly the most biologically accurate description he could have chosen.
It really is. It's so jarring. I mean, think about it like this. Imagine you're walking through the pristine, temperature-controlled marble halls of a grand ancient library.
Okay, I can picture that.
Everything is quiet, sterile, ordered.
Right.
That's the freezing north. And then you turn a corner into the next wing, and suddenly the marble floor is squishy.
Oh, gross.
Right. The bookshelves are suddenly made of pulsating meat, the books are bleeding black ink, and the air is 110 degrees, smelling like sulfur and rot.
It's a total subversion of the expected environment.
It's a physical tumor sprouting on a healthy body. Like, imagine if your own body suddenly decided to grow a completely foreign, hostile organ on your arm.
It's deeply unsettling.
It's a complete breakdown of reality in one specific localized area. You just wouldn't be able to comprehend it. You'd think you were hallucinating. The cognitive dissonance of walking from sub-zero snow into a humid, fleshy jungle, it just fries your brain.
And exploring the mechanism behind that breakdown is vital here, because we're not looking at a dormant volcano that just coincidentally erupted beneath the ice.
Right, this is not a natural disaster.
No, this is the active, deliberate terraforming of physical space.
They are rewriting the laws of physics with their madness. It's terrifying.
Because the nature of reality in Nosgoth is tethered to the pillars. The guardians of the Circle of Nine are not just political or religious figures, they are the living anchors of elemental forces.
Which we've established, but it really hits home here.
It does. When Nopraptor's mental shockwave infected the Circle, it didn't merely induce hallucinations or erratic behavior in these people. Their insanity became physically contagious to the environment itself.
Wow. Contagious insanity.
Yes. Dark Eden is the horrifying result of mental infection rewriting physical geography. The land is directly reflecting the broken minds of its stewards.
But a fragile ecosystem of madness like this can only exist through a very specific collaboration, right? This isn't just one rogue god throwing a tantrum in isolation.
No, not at all.
We have to profile the architects behind this, because Dark Eden is ruled by a triad of insanity. 3 distinct guardians working together to cultivate this absolute horror.
And what makes their work so deeply disturbing is how their original noble purposes have been inverted into grotesque perversion.
Yeah, it's sick.
They are not merely destroying the world, they are actively creating abominations, using the divine mandates they were given to protect it.
Let's dissect them one by one. Starting with Bane, the nature guardian. The visual design alone tells a grim story. He wears this massive, primitive stag skull headdress.
Visually, he presents as a dark, corrupted druid. In the centuries before the madness, Bane was the steward of Nosgoth's flora and fauna. His divine mandate was protection, ensuring the natural balance of the forests, the life cycles of the animals, the turning of the seasons.
But that stewardship has just totally curdled. It's as if a master gardener suddenly decided that his roses aren't beautiful unless they have teeth and consume blood.
That's exactly it.
His madness drives him to mutate the very life he was sworn to protect. He terraforms the forests into grasping, predatory traps. He captures innocent animals and twists their biology, turning them into bloodthirsty abominations to patrol the perimeter of Dark Eden.
He has taken the concept of nature and weaponized it against the natural world. He cultivates a thriving ecosystem of horrors.
And beside him, in this endeavor, is Dejoule, the energy guardian. Her narrative is steeped in a profound physical agony, isn't it?
Oh, her lore is incredibly tragic when you really sit with the mechanics of her existence. Her corruption is perhaps the most outwardly destructive of the group.
How so?
Well, her body has fundamentally altered. She has effectively become a walking nuclear reactor of pure, unstable, magical anguish, constantly radiating lethal energy.
So her magic, which was intended to be the vitalizing spark of the world, is now a toxic radioactive hazard. She can't even exist in the open air without vaporizing nearby life.
No, she can't.
That's why she is forced to wear that massive, heavy insulating cloak at all times. She is trapped inside her own power, burning from the inside out, completely isolated by the lethality of her mere presence.
The isolation forced upon her by her own uncontrollable energy adds this layer of bitter resentment to her madness. It's palpable.
And rounding out this unholy trinity is the third member, Anacrothe.
Ah, Anacrothe.
Yeah.
The Alchemist. The state's guardian.
Right. Anacrothe positions himself as the intellectual heavyweight of the group. He is the architect mixing base metals and dark magic to literally construct the flesh beasts that roam the boiling mud.
He views himself as a visionary creator, a grand god playing with the fundamental building blocks of reality. He projects an aura of supreme intellectual dominance.
But, and this is a big but, beneath the grand pretensions and the alchemical mastery, there is a fatal flaw that defines his character entirely. Anacrothe is a profound coward.
He really is. It changes the entire dynamic of the group once you realize that.
It totally does. For all his posturing, he is entirely reliant on the other two for his physical safety. He hides behind Bane's mutated beasts and uses Dejoule's radioactive power as a shield.
He is a parasite feeding off their raw strength.
Which brings us to the unique psychological terror of this triad. Because, we analyzed Nopraptor's madness previously, noting his extreme isolation.
No, right. Nopraptor locked himself away.
Yeah, he was so consumed by grief over Ariel's murder that he locked himself in a retreat, physically stitching his own eyes and mouth shut to block out the world. His madness was implosive. It was a solitary, self-mutilating tragedy.
But Dark Eden is the exact opposite. This is an explosive, highly toxic codependency.
Yes, they are actively feeding off each other's sickness. Think of it like, imagine the most brilliant, high-functioning academic research team imaginable, right? Top of their fields.
Sure.
Now imagine that entire team suffers a shared violent psychotic break. But instead of disbanding or seeking help, they lock the doors and stay in the lab.
Oh, that's a terrifying thought.
Right. They realize that if the chemist Anacrothe provides the raw, unstable biomatter, the biologist Bane can mutate it into living weapons. And the physicist Dejoule can power the whole facility with her unstable reactor.
They're completely enabling each other's worst delusions.
Exactly. It's like a folie à trois. If any one of them were alone, they might just collapse into catatonia or be consumed by their own erratic magic. But together, they validate each other. They combine their corrupted specialties to build a localized hell. It is the ultimate nightmare group project.
Nightmare group project is the perfect way to put it. They have synergized their insanity.
They really have.
Bane provides the canvas of corrupted earth, Anacrothe provides the alchemical paint of flesh and metal, and Dejoule provides the searing radioactive lighting.
But a synergy built on madness relies on an incredibly fragile social contract, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, and that contract is tested the moment an outside force applies pressure.
Because Kain doesn't arrive at the volcanic dome with a diplomatic envoy. He breaches the Sanctum with extreme prejudice.
The intrusion is violent and sudden.
Put yourself in Kain's boots for a second. You're wading through steaming, mutated trenches. The air is so thick with sulfur you can barely see. Your physical health is constantly deteriorating just by standing in this environment.
The passive damage is relentless.
You are swinging the spiked maze to literally shatter calcified bone barricades, seamlessly swapping to the iron sword to carve through Bane's mutant hounds. You are covered in volcanic mud, blood, and ash, and then you kick down the doors to the inner chamber.
And he discovers the Triad in the very act of creation.
Yes, they are standing around a bubbling pool of raw, molten energy, actively shaping the corrupted landscape of Dark Eden in real time, playing God with the earth. Kain interrupts them, sword drawn.
And as a player, or just as a listener, you brace for the ultimate magical onslaught.
You expect these three gods of Nosgoth to turn their combined world-altering power against you.
Yet the illusion of their divine unity shatters instantly upon contact with real danger.
It's almost pathetic. The archives capture this moment perfectly. Listen to Kain's observation of the confrontation. The sheer dripping disgust in his voice is just palpable here. They stood before me, the architects of this corrupted paradise. But as I drew my blade, the grand sorcerers of Nosgoth did not offer a battle of spells. The alchemist Anacrothe, displaying the true Sniveling heart of the circle, cried out for protection. He did not fight, he summoned.
The true Sniveling heart of the circle. That single phrase dismantles centuries of reverence.
It is a stunning revelation. Anacrothe, the grand architect of this localized hell, looks at a single, mud-covered vampire and absolutely panics.
He loses his nerve completely.
He doesn't cast a fireball. He doesn't attempt to transmute Kain's blood into lead or anything cool. He uses his vast alchemical knowledge for one purpose: to tear open a dimensional portal. And out of that portal steps Malek,
The immortal Paladin.
the unkillable ghost bound to armor who nearly ended Kain's journey in the early days of his quest.
And we must examine the precise mechanical detail of this betrayal, because it's breathtaking. The very second Malik manifests, the moment the Paladin raises his halberd to engage the threat and fulfill his duty.
And Fiera teleports away. He literally vanishes into the shadows.
He completely abandons Bane and Dejoule. He summons a meat shield, or rather a steel shield, and flees, leaving the partners he built this entire corrupted paradise alongside to face the wrath of the vampire without him.
Unbelievable.
And to be clear, for the historical record of the archives, Anacrothe survives this encounter. He successfully slinks away to cower in the dark, preserving his own life at the expense of his peers.
If you ever had a leader who preached shared sacrifice, but was the first to the lifeboats, you understand the magnitude of this betrayal.
That's infuriating.
It is a massive moment for the lore because it destroys the romanticized myth of the Circle of Nine. Up until this specific encounter, the history of Nosgoth, the texts, the murals, they all depict the Circle as noble, self-sacrificing protectors, the holy martyrs holding the world together.
The meticulously curated propaganda of the state.
Yes. But here, the mask slips completely. Anacrothe acts like a corrupt five-star general, right? Imagine a general who initiates a devastating war, realizes the enemy has breached his personal bunker, and instead of drawing his sidearm to defend his staff,
he bails.
He locks his own soldiers inside the burning room to slow the enemy down while he escapes out the back window to his private helicopter.
That is exactly what happens.
It proves to Kain that these entities are not divine. They are terrified, selfish, deeply flawed mortals who just happen to have their hands on the levers of the universe.
And this realization provides Kain with immense philosophical vindication. In his mind, he is no longer assassinating holy saints. He's exterminating cowards who are actively poisoning the world. He feels entirely justified.
Sure, but philosophical high ground is useless against a physical threat.
Very true.
Anacrothe may be a coward, but his tactical summon was highly effective. The philosophy doesn't save you when a 7-foot-tall suit of haunted steel is swinging a massive blade at your neck. Kain is immediately plunged into a phenomenally dire situation.
We're looking at a complete tactical impasse here.
Let's consider the layout of the chamber. The exits are sealed, the air is suffocating. Standing before Kain are Bane, ready to weaponize the earth beneath his feet, Dejoule, radiating a localized nuclear hazard, and Malek, the invincible Paladin.
And as we establish in our deep dive of Nupraptor's retreat, Kain has a fundamental biological problem with Malek.
Right. Kain is a vampire. He requires the consumption of blood to heal, to sustain his energy, and to survive physical trauma. But Malek possesses no blood.
He is a hollow, vengeful spirit bound to enchanted armor.
Kain's fangs find no purchase. His spiked mace and iron sword, regardless of the kinetic force behind them, cannot pierce Malek's steel.
It is a literal dead end. Malek represents an immovable object. In a direct physical confrontation, Kain perishes. The math of the encounter guarantees it.
But Kain is no longer the naive fledgling who stumbled through his early encounters. He has evolved. He is prepared for this exact contingency. He reaches into his cloak and plays the trump card Moebius ensured he acquired.
Vorador's signet ring.
He activates it.
Yeah.
And the entire narrative temperature of the room drops.
Oh, it's brilliant.
The ground shakes, not from volcanic tremors, but from an ancient, heavy presence. The thick, sulfurous steam slowly parts. And from the shadows, Vorador manifests.
He doesn't burst in with frantic battle energy either.
No. He arrives with the terrifying, absolute calm of an apex predator who knows he has no equal in the room. Vorador completely ignores Kain. He doesn't even glance at the fledgling vampire.
He has bigger fish to fry.
He looks across the steaming chamber and locks his glowing eyes solely on Malek.
He locks eyes with the architect of his own historical vengeance.
The dialogue recorded here is arguably some of the greatest in the entire archives. It carries the weight of centuries. Vorador looks at the towering paladin and speaks with a chilling elegance. Malek, do you remember the halls of the Sarafan? Do you remember the blood of your precious circle on my claws? We have an unfinished dance, Paladin. Let us see if your hollow steel has grown any stronger over the centuries.
The sheer cinematic gravity of that arrival cannot be overstated. It gives me chills.
It is awe-inspiring. Yeah. And as a player navigating this world, you are suddenly violently sidelined in your own story. You're forced to step back and watch a historic grudge match unfold.
It's humbling, really.
Imagine you are a novice mountain climber, struggling to survive a treacherous ravine. Suddenly, the two massive mountains on either side of you uproot themselves and begin to physically tear each other apart.
Yes.
It is a clash between two ancient, immovable monuments of historical hatred. Vorador and Malek are tectonic plates grinding together in the background of the chamber. You, as Kain, are merely trying not to get crushed in the shockwave of their violence.
And to fully appreciate the weight of this clash, we must delve into the deep historical context. We must remember the catalyst for Malek's current state of existence.
Right. Why he is in that armor to begin with.
Centuries ago, in a retaliatory strike, Vorador single-handedly infiltrated the heavily fortified Sarafan stronghold. He systematically slaughtered 6 members of the Circle of Nine.
Just a total massacre.
And Malek, the guardian of conflict, the sworn dedicated protector of the Circle, failed his mandate. He arrived too late to stop the carnage. He was profoundly humiliated, standing amidst the blood of his charges.
And the necromancer Mortanius delivered a punishment worse than death for that failure. He ripped Malek's soul from his flesh and fused it to his armor, damning him to serve eternally as a hollow ghost, never allowed to rest, constantly reminded of his singular catastrophic failure.
Precisely. So when we analyze this battle in Dark Eden, we are witnessing Malek's ultimate devastating humiliation playing out in real time. Consider the psychology of the Paladin in this moment.
Okay, yeah, let's think about that.
He is summoned by Anacrothe to defend the current circle from a vampire threat. This is his opportunity for redemption. He can finally fulfill his duty and protect the sorcerers from Kain.
He probably thought, this is my moment.
Exactly. But he is denied even the dignity of fighting the current threat. Before he can strike Kain, he is intercepted by his oldest tormentor.
Oh, that is rough.
The very monster who ruined his life, stripped him of his humanity, and turned him into a haunted relic centuries ago, simply waltzes back into the room to finish the job.
Malik is not engaging in a heroic defense. He is being casually intercepted and systematically dismantled by the bully who broke him in the first place.
It is a brutal, humiliating end. Vorador steps in, essentially says, "No, you're still mine," and begins to tear the chamber apart.
But while these two ancient titans are hurling each other through stone pillars in the background, Kain does not have the luxury of standing back and watching the spectacle. The threat to his life is immediate.
Right. The background is a legendary cinematic duel, but the foreground is a chaotic, desperate struggle for survival. We enter the calculus of carnage.
Kain is locked into a 2-on-1 fight against Bane and Dejoule. And this is where the tactical evolution we discussed earlier, the integration of the energy bank, becomes absolutely critical. Let's break down the mechanics of this fight. Why can't Kain simply rush in, swing his spiked mace to break their defenses, and hack them down with the iron sword?
Because the physics of their combined magic completely prohibit a straightforward melee assault. The tactical geometry of the room requires a fundamentally different approach. Consider Dejoule's presence.
Right, the walking nuclear reactor.
Exactly. As we noted, she is a walking radioactive hazard. If Kain attempts to close the distance and engage her in close quarters combat, he sustains massive passive energy damage simply by entering her proximity.
He'd just cook alive.
She does not even need to cast a directed spell at him. Her mere physical presence is lethal. Furthermore, she is constantly projecting unpredictable, chaotic rings of magical light that ricochet violently around the confined stone floor.
So staying close to Dejoule is a death sentence. But you can't simply retreat to the edges of the room and carefully plan your strikes either, because Bane controls the very ground you stand on.
Exactly. While Dejoule denies the airspace and the immediate perimeter around her, Bane actively denies the terrain. Bane is constantly terraforming the floor of the arena beneath Kain's feet.
It's just a nightmare arena.
He summons deadly, calcified earth spikes that violently erupt from the stone, and he mutates patches of the ground into grasping quicksand designed to trap Kain's movements. If Kain stops moving for even a second, Bane traps his feet, and Dejoule's radiating energy vaporizes him.
So mechanically, how does a vampire survive this?
Yeah.
How does the Sorcerer King emerge from a room where the air is toxic and the ground is literally trying to eat him?
This is where the expansive reservoir of the energy bank saves his life. Kain is forced to temporarily abandon his identity as a brutal melee fighter and fully embrace the role of a highly mobile sorcerer.
He has to play keep away.
He must maintain a calculated distance from both guardians. He relies heavily on his shape-shifting abilities, transforming into a wolf to gain the speed necessary to leap over Bane's quicksand traps, or shifting into mist to let Dejoule's erratic energy rings pass harmlessly through his intangible form.
It is a high-stakes, incredibly stressful dance. He is constantly shifting forms, managing space, watching the ground, and tracking the energy pulses all at once.
And amidst that frantic evasion, he must dip into the vast reserves of the energy bank to unleash his own barrages of ranged dark magic.
Oh, right, because he has to actually attack them eventually.
Yes. He is forced to fire continuous spells across the chamber to slowly, methodically whittle down Dejoule's heavy insulating cloak, breaking her defensive shell from afar. Simultaneously, he must calculate the trajectory of his spells to bypass Bane's erupting earth walls. He must outmagic the elemental masters of magic, using their own chaotic energy against them.
And, against all odds, the newly turned vampire actually pulls it off. The resolution of this chaotic melee is incredibly visceral. Kain manages to corner Bane amidst the shifting terrain. He closes the distance just enough to slaughter the Nature Guardian right there in the boiling, corrupted mud.
The brutal end for Bane.
As Bane falls, that massive, primitive stag skull headdress tumbles into the dirt, signaling the end of his twisted druidic reign. Then Kain turns his focused arcane power entirely on Dejoule, finally shattering her completely.
Her physical form dissolves under the assault, and her unstable energy violently dissipates into the ether. Her heavy insulating cloak just collapses empty to the scorched earth.
The Triad is decisively broken. Anacrothe fled into the shadows, Bane lies dead in the mud, and Dejoule is eradicated.
The immediate threat neutralizes. And as the smoke and sulfur slowly clear in the foreground, Kain turns his attention back to the clash of the Titans.
The background tremors have finally ceased. Vorador has completely dismantled the Paladin. He didn't merely defeat Malik, he tore the invincible suit of enchanted steel limb from limb.
It's almost hard to picture the sheer violence it would take to do that.
All that remains of the immortal Sarafan Paladin, the guardian of conflict who terrified Kain into fleeing just a few weeks prior, is a hollow, crushed, violently dented helmet resting quietly in the dirt.
And Vorador, having sated his ancient grudge, simply vanishes back into the shadows to return to the opulent halls of the Black Forest.
He doesn't even say goodbye. He offers no grand speech, no parting advice to Kain. He delivered the execution he promised, and he departs.
Which leaves Kain standing completely alone in the silent ruins of Dark Eden.
Yeah. And this brings us to a critical juncture in our analysis. The spoils of Dark Eden and the curing of the pillars.
This quiet aftermath is where we truly see the psychological shift in Kain solidify. We witness the emergence of the pragmatic predator.
Think about Kain's mental state at the very beginning of his journey, right after his resurrection. If he had stumbled into this chamber and witnessed this level of apocalyptic carnage, two godlike beings dead at his feet, an immortal paladin, physically crushed to scrap metal, a localized volcano erupting out of an ancient glacier.
He would have been deeply horrified, or at the very least, profoundly shaken by the sheer scale of the violence.
Exactly. But now, standing in the ruins of Dark Eden, he offers no prayers for the fallen. He does not pause to reflect on the tragedy of Nopraptor's initial madness that infected these once noble protectors. He is stone cold.
He views the scene entirely through the lens of a predator claiming his rightful kills. He simply walks over the scorched earth and loots the bodies of the gods.
It's all just resources to him now.
He takes their vital tokens, the physical proof of their defeat, which is required to cleanse their respective pillars. He bends down and claims Bane's antler headdress. He gathers the heavy fabric of Dejoule's insulating cloak, and he retrieves Malik's crushed helmet from the dirt.
It is merely a checklist to him now, a grim set of errands. He gathers these morbid spoils and journeys all the way back south, leaving the boiling ice behind to return to the desolate sanctuary of the Pillars of Nosgoth.
A long, silent walk back.
And the visual design of this return is perfectly gothic. He walks up to the glowing ghost of Ariel, who eternally floats in front of these towering, decaying columns, and he offers the tokens. And we watch as the physical manifestation of the cure takes hold. 3 more massive columns, the Pillar of Nature, the Pillar of Energy, and the Pillar of Conflict, shudder violently. The blackened, oozing rot that has plagued them for decades simply wipes away, and they are restored to pristine, gleaming white marble.
It is a moment of undeniable, tangible triumph. It is physical proof to Kain that his incredibly bloody, morally compromising mission is actually working. The world is physically healing as a direct result of his murders.
And this tangible success leads us directly to the hubris of the pawn. Because Kain's psychological state is reaching a dangerous critical mass here. Let's just tally his achievements up to this point. He has now successfully cleansed 4 of the 9 pillars of Nosgoth.
That's nearly half the board.
He has personally slaughtered 3 elemental guardians, and he successfully orchestrated the death of the unkillable paladin by manipulating an ancient grudge. He feels entirely invincible.
And why wouldn't he? From his perspective, he's winning.
Right. Think back to the chess analogy we discussed earlier. Kain is a pawn, but he's a pawn that has marched relentlessly across the entire board. He has systematically taken out knights, bishops, and rooks.
He's clearing the path.
He's gaining so much physical power, he is absorbing so much dark magic, and he is so emboldened by the visual proof of the healing pillars that he begins to mistake himself for the chess player.
That is the crucial error.
He looks down at the board, sees the pieces he has removed, and thinks, I am the master of this game. I am bending destiny to my will. He completely forgets, or perhaps willfully ignores, that the only reason he is standing there victorious is because the Grandmaster Moebius moved him to that specific square.
Right. Moebius protected his advance and deliberately fed him the exact pieces necessary to secure the win.
It is the ultimate tragic illusion of agency.
And it demands that we, as observers, push back against Kain's blinding arrogance. I mean, yes, the pillars are turning white, yes, his enemies lie dead in the mud, but what is he actually accomplishing?
He's just doing someone else's chores.
Exactly. He is merely carrying out the brutal, calculated errands of dead and manipulative gods. He's entirely blind to the temporal strings Moebius is pulling from the shadows.
And every victory he claims just inflates his ego. And that inflated ego makes him infinitely easier to manipulate.
He is so intensely focused on the blood dripping from his sword that he cannot see the invisible hand guiding his arm.
It is a tragic irony that defines the very core of this entire franchise. He believes his power grants him freedom, when in reality, it only makes him a more effective slave to the timeline. And it perfectly sets the stage for the horrors yet to come. Because the board is clearing, yes, but the remaining pieces are infinitely more dangerous, and the true game has barely begun. Which brings us to the close of our archives for today.
Time flies.
It really does. 4 of the 9 columns stand tall and pristine once more, their white marble gleaming like cold bone against the dark sky of Nosgoth. Kain has proven himself to be a devastatingly efficient executioner. He has broken the unkillable Paladin Malek, shattered the mutated Eden of the North, and sent the alchemist Anacrothe fleeing into the shadows like a rat from a burning cellar. But as the pillars begin to heal, a dangerous question emerges for you to ponder. If restoring the balance of the world requires the systematic slaughter of its protectors, at what point does the cure become far more terrifying than the disease? We will see you next time, deep in the archives.